Hey class, today is the day. It is the last day of our summer class in Modern American Literature. I hope that all of you feel that you've accomplished a lot because this class, as I've said before, even privately to some of you, this has been a marathon class. But I have been, during this really difficult time, all of us self-isolating, kind of worrying about our jobs, worrying about our futures, worrying about our education, worrying our families. The list goes on and on. You all have dedicated yourselves to literature, to your education, and you've gone above and beyond, so many of you, to apply this literature to your life and think a bit more deeply about how the English language, how literature can not only individually and existentially improve your own lives, but in ways that you can improve others' lives by sharing it. And I live by that gospel, for the lack of a better term. So in this farewell video, I wanted to share just a couple more poems with you based on the entire class's interest. Many of you wrote about Mary Oliver in your week 3 discussion board, and several of you from your outlines, I can tell that you want to write about Mary Oliver for your final paper. And when I saw that so many of you loved her work the way that I do, I have thought about my year since March and how often I have turned to Mary Oliver. She's been my respite. Her poetry has been my respite. And when I've had just an incredibly terrible day, or when I don't feel that I have the resources or the energy to be able to think about how I'm going to teach you, or how I'm going to be able to teach my students in the fall in an unprecedented course facilitation mode, I've continually turned to her work. So, and I wanted to choose one poem to be able to read to you, but I couldn't do it. I oscillated between two, and I thought, well, maybe they just need one message. They just need one more big message from me. But I'm like, no, I actually have 2 farewell messages. And Mary Oliver is the medicine. She has the solution, and I think she has the perspective and foresight for us to be able to get through the rest of this summer, because we're taking it just one season at a time now, more than ever, sometimes even a day at a time, because that's all that we can do. And I have 2 messages for you today. And Mary Oliver is going to be our spokesperson. The first poem that I want to share with you is from her Pulitzer Prize winning collection, Dream Work. Wild Geese is also published in this collection. And for this poem, it's called The Journey. I hope that when life becomes a little bit too much to bear, that you start hearing a lot of negative voices in your head, when the weight becomes too much, that you can turn back to this poem and know that you're going to make it through. This poem is called The Journey, and I have provided links below in this news item if you would like to click on the poem to be able to read along with me. The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own. that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. So take care of yourselves. It's not a crime to put yourself first, to put your health first, to put your family first, to put your education first. And when there are folks that tell you that you're being selfish for doing so, those are the voices that you likely need to filter out so that you can hear your own voice and what you need first. Okay, so that's my first message. Those are for the hard times, when you feel that you can't bear it all and you need a bit of perspective to quiet all of those other voices. This other poem that I want to share with you is more about my wish as your professor for you as my students and soon to be my former students. I say once my student, always mine. So even as you go along in your life, and we may never meet each other, and that's the likelihood, and we know that when we go into an online class, that I still hope that students obtain their dreams, their career goals, and that they become the professionals that they want to. But I also hope that you can create your own lively, satisfying, wild, encouraging private life and inner life, where you can have the security in your job and your career to where you can build these additional blisses, joys, and a respite kind of peace. And this poem that I want to share with you last is from her collection called Thirst. There are a lot of kind of God and nature devotional, very Whitman-esque poems in here. This is the kind of Mary Oliver that I like students to remember in reference to the overarching meta-narratives of American literary history since Whitman. We love her poems like The Journey and Wild Geese because they give us perspective, and it's almost like a sermon. But these poems are centralized, and the imagery comes from nature a lot more, and she delves into it. And it is the opening poem in her collection. And for you, this is what I hope. Messenger. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums. Here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing, since all the ingredients are here, which is gratitude, to be given a mind and a heart and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug-up clam, telling them all over and over how it is that we live forever. Thank you all for a wonderful semester. I'm always your advocate, and I am rooting for you always.